أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن ربكم الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش يغشي الليل النهار يطلبه حثيثا والشمس والقمر والنجوم مسخرات بأمره ألا له الخلق والأمر تبارك الله رب العالمين. صلوات بيجي محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Tonight is the 6th majlis in this series of majalis, in which from the last 5 nights we've been discussing under this verse from Surah Araf 54, the topic of Naqsh A'imma Dar Ahya Deen, role of Ma'asumeen and Imams in the revival of religion. And I have thrown towards you many istilahat, many of these terminologies, which required some explanation before we move forward with our discussions. And if you remember last night, as we were discussing under that hadith from the noble prophet Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam, where he says, Sayati zamanun ala ummati, a time will come upon my people, la yabqa min al-islam illa ismuh, wa la yabqa min al-Qur'an illa rasmuh. That nothing of Islam will remain except its name, and nothing of Quran will remain except the words and the text. Now this prophecy is of course there, which tells us that there will be a lot of attacks to undermine our madhab, and there will be propagandas, there will be trying to weaken madhab Ahl Bayt. And we all know very well, looking at the history of mankind and the recent history, that if a nation or if a powerful nation wants to make others weak, there are many ways of doing so. One of the ways you can make someone weak is, of course, by placing sanctions on them, as we are too aware of this phenomena, by those powerful superpowers of the world, how they are able to put upon these sanctions on smaller nations and to get to what they want to and make them agree to what they want to agree. Another way of doing such a thing is when you're attacking a theology or a madhab or religion, is to either attack from the outside or from the inside. When you attack from the outside, it's the apparent enemy that everyone can recognize. If someone came running up to me, I can see the danger. But if the danger existed inside, within our own, that will be very difficult to point out. And that's why many of the traditions from the noble prophet address this fact, that he wasn't much worried about the kuffar, the polytheists of Mecca and the mushrikeen of that time. He was more worried about the munafiqeen in the libas of Islam, because they're more dangerous. With their infiltration, not knowing what they might be doing and how they might be working, it's something which is very, very difficult to see. If the attack is from outside, it's apparent, it's obvious. When the attack is from inside, it's difficult to point out. And therefore, this hadith of the Prophet, Sayati zamanun ala ummati, that a time will come upon my nation that nothing of Islam will remain and nothing of Quran will remain. This, at least to an extent, tells us, qadr mutayaqqin, as the istilah that they use, is that there will be attempts. Even if they don't accomplish absolutely, there will be attempts to undermine this madhab, the sanctity of this madhab. And we're all too well versed with this, growing up in subcontinent, knowing the history of subcontinent, how British ruled us for many years, and their policy of conquer, divide, and rule. All those are there for us. So one of the things that existed in front of them was madhab tashayyu. Now, overall, Islam was a threat to them. And I'm not going to point out who's them. But Islam was a threat, an open threat. How can you go ahead and weaken Islam? It's continuously growing. The fastest growing religion on the face of the earth. And it wouldn't be too long, in a few decades, where we outnumber other religions. So this is one of the Islamic leaders of one of the Islamic nations, without condoning any of his acts, actually said that. He said, we don't need to go into fight with these people. Demographically, we'll be in power very soon because of the number of Muslims every day. But with that said, we realize that until that achievement is there, they knew that Islam would be a threat to them. So they needed to do something about it. They needed to go ahead and create fitna inside. And once the fitna is created from within, then we'll be able to get them busy in what they're doing, and we'll ambush them at that time. So there were many fitan that were created in the past 100 years. You had these pseudo-Mahdis, people claiming to be the Mahdi. You had the Qadianiyat introduced. You had Bahaiyat introduced. And then you had Wahhabiyat introduced. The Mahdi Sudani didn't last too long. That fitna was also funded in order to undermine Islam. But of course, that went away. Bahaiyat was introduced in Iran. That kept on going, but of course, they also lost their strength. The accomplishment that they want, they did not achieve to the extent. Even with Qadianiyat, they were able to infiltrate many of the Muslim countries, but again, Muslims realized that they have nothing to do with Islam, and some of the Muslim countries labeled them to be non-Muslims. At least in Pakistan, they're considered to be non-Muslims. But the fitna of Wahhabiyat prevailed. It prevailed, and what did it do? Look at the similarity between all of these movements. They came to attack the aqaid and to undermine the beliefs of Islam, the core beliefs. And so the concept of Mahdaviyyat, we all have. We are waiting for the Imam. Every nation is waiting for a savior. There's a Messiah for everyone. Our belief is different than others. We believe that he's here. He's in hiding or occultation. Others believe that he will come one day, he will be born, he's not born yet, and so on and so forth. So to go ahead and introduce these pseudo-Mahdis is to go ahead and confuse people with that. Imam Mahdi already came and he left. So what he wanted to accomplish has been accomplished, and that's it. That happened back in late 1890s and early 1900s. And then when you look at Baha'iyyat or Qadianiyat, they also attack to that same extent the core beliefs of Islam. And then finally, the Wahhabiyyat, which then goes ahead and mixes the beliefs with, as far as the Quran is concerned, a lot of these things which we have as far as God is concerned are tempered with and changed. And so that we have a definite conflict when it comes to the Wahhabi theology. You know, things that they introduce like grave worship. Shias worship the graves. Where have you seen Shias worshiping the graves? We revere the personalities that are buried there. I recited this ayat a couple of days ago as well, last night as well, quoting from Surah Tawbah, that don't stand on the grave of those who have died. Of course, using this, saying that, standing on the grave is not right. Shias, when they stand on the graves, when they, do tawassul to them, that is not right. So they were able to create this huge gap between the two main streams of Islam. We agree? To an extent, they were able to divide that division which already existed in the two main streams, Shias and the Sunnis. They were able to further divide us, and they were able to make it more and more apparent, more obvious. Now they said, well, while we're able to do that, Shi'at is something which is more of a cause of problem in the longer run. Sunnis will be siding with the Wahhabiyyat, but the Shias won't side with them. So now we have made this group to be exclusive. What to do with them? Look at the practices of the madhab-e tashayyu, things that are very dear to them. Attack that. Things upon which they won't compromise anything. Attack that institution. And if you ask any Shia, Azadari is that very core institution in us. That institution for which, as I mentioned a few nights ago, and you've heard, nothing new, that regardless of where we come from, as long as first Shaza of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Muharram begins, people from all walks of life will be sitting together. Doesn't matter how much difference I have with you when it comes to where I come from, where you come from, or familial, resistance. First Shaza for Sayyid al-Shuhada, we're all together here. So go ahead and attack that. Go ahead and infiltrate in it, see what we can achieve. And therefore, they started using certain people to undermine the core Shia beliefs. To that, I want to bring you to what we had discussed yesterday, that these are two makatib-e fikr that we have. So you have maktab-e imamat, and you had maktab-e khilafat. In maktab-e imamat, we talked about some of the features of maktab-e imamat, that imam is chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even Prophet does not choose the imam. I think that's where our brothers in Islam, they felt that Rasulullah did not choose, that Rasulullah did not appoint anyone. No, he did appoint. It's that it wasn't his call, it was the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But on numerous occasions, and I'll prove you a couple of those occasions tonight, that Rasulullah specifically mentioned, did things in a certain way and then reversed it, so that things will become more and more apparent and obvious. So we have this maktab-e imamat that we believe in. Imam is chosen by Allah. Imam is masoom, masoon anil khata, does not commit sins. Here, it wasn't in my discussion, but I was disturbed earlier today in a discussion that I had with fellow friends when someone shared a clip of, Sheikh. His name is Sheikh Arif Abdul Hussein. I'm sure some of you have heard of his talks. I won't recommend, but there's nothing to hide. You want to go ahead. Your beliefs are, mashallah, so strong that the first word you hear from this person, you'll reject it right away and you won't even tune back into him. So every year he comes out with some sort of controversy. And this is something which is planned, I believe. That slowly and gradually poison. You don't want to give everything together because that way you'll see the reaction. So slowly and gradually throw things out there. So in the recent discussion that he had, or the majalis that he's speaking to, I guess, to his audience, he talks about the concept of imamat, undermining the position of imams, saying that imams did not know many things. Imams did not even know, some of the imams, such as 6th Imam and 10th Imam, did not know who their successor would be. They thought it would be one child, but that child passed away, so Imam did not know. And he undermines the infallibility of imams on the same note. And then he goes to the extent talking about that prophets and imams are ordinary people, because if they were special, then how could they serve as role models for us? And he says that things, now they're ordinary people, but they're extremely at the supreme level, these are his words, so that they're capable, they have refined their souls to the extent that whatever amount of ilm ghaib is with them is attainable by any one of us. So you and I can also refine our souls to the extent where we can also access that ilm ghaib. And many such thoughts. Then he takes a turn and talks about the khulafa, and he talks about the wives, some of the wives of the Prophet, becoming very dramatic, saying that as soon as we mention the names of some of the wives of the Prophet, look at the faces of our Shia brothers. They start having this smirk on their face, and they start looking weirdly. When we mention the names of the khulafa with reverence, with respect, our people start looking weirdly. So what is wrong with this Maulana or this guy who's speaking about khulafa and the wives in this way? Now don't mix the fatwa of the marja, which says we should not bash or curse the revered personalities of other madhahib. And that includes, of course, Ahl Sunnah as well. So if they revere someone, we are not allowed to curse or bash according to the fatwa of Ayatollah Sistani. This has been there for some time. But that does not mean that when Ayatollah Sistani says that you should not do this, he's also saying the historical events don't exist either. He said, no, historical events are there. What they did is there. But even what they had done, we don't want you to be saying, openly cursing or bashing. You can talk about the history. That is the Sirat of Masumeen. Look at Amirul Mu'mineen. In the Battle of Siffin, go ahead and read khutbah number 206. He says what? When he heard some of his companions swearing and cursing Amir Sham, Imam stopped them. He said, don't do that. He said, Imam, is he not on batil? Absolutely, no doubt. Are we not on haq? He said, absolutely. He said, then why can't we do this? He said, no, instead of swearing and cursing, mention what they have done. their actions, that might be able to, open up the eyes of the people that are in with them, those who are qabile islah. They might learn and, they'll be with you, and there might not be war at all. Imam is looking to avoid the war at all costs. So when our marja gives the fatwa, don't bash, don't curse, don't swear, he's saying with that respect that yes, it might have consequences for example, other places. But he's not saying the historical events are also no longer existing. No, historically speaking, what these people did is there. Usurping the right of imamat is there. And in regards to the wives, Quranic ayat, are you going to remove the ayat of Quran? Surah Tahrim, which talks about the two of the wives, is specifically, and there's no difference of explanation from the Shia perspective or the Sunni perspective, that who those two wives are, that Quran says, in tatuba faqad sagat qulubukuma, that if you two do tawbah, indeed your hearts have swerved. Zang lag gaya hai dilon ko. The ayat is there. So the marja is not saying that this ayat is not there or this ayat is not referring to that. His understanding is different. In order to keep a peace and harmonious, understanding, which existed actually prior to the fitna of Wahhabiyat between the Shias and the Sunnis. They all agreed that there's differences of opinion, what someone has done and what the other party has done. So with that said, this guy comes out and he explains and he undermines the imamat of Masumin, saying that they're not Masum, they're not infallible. Infallibility is only with Allah. That is a pure Sunni aqidah. And we respect their aqidah. We differ with it. We respect their aqidah. Our aqidah is Allah is Masoom, absolutely. Then Anbiya are Masoom, and Ahlul Bayt are also Masoom. In fact, if I go a little bit further, what does Masoom mean? There are two types of ismats that we've seen. One in the angels, one in the prophets and imams. The one in the angels is different. Different in a sense that there's no functionality in them to do anything haram or go against the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But with Anbiya and Aimma, they have absolute authority to do so if they want to. It's not like their hands are tied up. I'll give an example. I hope you don't mind this example. I'm just giving merely for the purpose of example. There's haram meat. Can Imam not pick up and eat it? Of course, he won't. You and I won't do that. But nothing is stopping Imam from the aspect that angels are Masoom and the Imams are Masoom. From this aspect, it's a good segue into my next talk, that to an extent, you and I are also Masoom. We're not absolutely Masoom. That absolute ismat belongs to Aimma Athar, but we're not there. But to an extent, you and I are also Masoom. How? There are many sins. Who's Masoom? Masoom is Masoon anil khata, the one who does not make mistakes. There are many things that you and I have not committed, nor have we even thought about committing. Adultery is a sin. You and I, we have not thought about or done it. Alcohol is a sin, drinking it. You and I have not done so. And there are thousands of other things that you and I have refrained from doing so. So in those things, we are partially Masoom. And then you look at those who are, for example, greater scholars, bigger scholars. They had more self-reform, so they were able to refrain for hundreds more things than you and I were, for example. Then you look at the Anbiya, then you look at the Ma'asumeen, of course, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them complete ismat. So this guy is trying to undermine when he mentions. Problem is, these people who are self-taught, they come up with these ideas thinking that the mainstream will miss out on it. Just a few ayat, I think he's Qabila Islah. There's probability of him reforming to what he's saying. So refer to some ayat of Quran. In one of the ayat of Surah Tawbah, ayat 105, Allah says, وَقُلْ اعْمَلُوا. Go ahead and perform your amal. فَسَيَرَ اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Go ahead and act. Allah will see your action, Prophet will see your action, and mu'mineen will see your action. My question, in the past 24 hours, Allah saw my actions, right? Alam ya'lam bi anna Allah yara. Allah sees everything. According to this ayat, Prophet sees. Prophet saw my action. Mu'min, mashallah, you're all mu'mineen. Did you see my actions? Even if you had a surveillance upon me, you'll miss out because you got other things to do. And how can you have surveillance on everyone? Although the government might have it, but aside from that, coming back to the ayat, having knowledge of what I've done in the past 24 hours, you might say a few things, you might guess a few things. Maulana, you might have done salat. Yeah, alhamdulillah, I did pray. Or other things that you might mention. But you don't have knowledge of what I did. So, who's the mu'min here? Who's being referred to as mu'min in this ayah? Mu'min in this ayat is not you and I as mu'mineen. Mu'min is this, the ayah is someone who also has been given this knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Rawayat mentioned that the mu'min over here refers to Masumeen alayhimu salatu wassalam. Salawat bi Muhammad wa alam. Surah Qadr, everybody recites this surah, especially in the nights of Qadr. Every child memorizes this ayah, this surah. Beginning with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatul qadr, wa ma adraka ma laylatul qadr khayrun min alfi shahr. Tanazzalul malaika. If you know a little bit of Arabic, the word tanazzulul malaika is not fi'l mazi, that you say, well, it was in the time of Rasulullah only. That malaika came down on the Prophet. Tanazzalu is not, there's a hasf of the first letter in it. It was tatanazzalu or yatanazzalu. More appropriately, tatanazzalu because of the malaika. The word malaika is mu'annas because of the ta' marbuta at the end. Tatanazzalul malaika, that means what? Malaika descend, fi'l muzari, that means in present. Right now, every year, Laylatul Qadr, malaika descend. Fifth Imam was asked, who do they come down to? Are they coming down onto you? Imam said, absolutely. They come down and they inform us of the ahwal for the entire year, of what our Shias are going through. This knowledge is shared by the malaika through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and given it to us. So that's another ayat for you to look into. I'm sure you are qabile islah. And then many other ayat in Quran which talk about the ilm ghaib that Allah gave to some of His prophets, or even those who were not even prophets. What is ilm ghaib? Yeah, when it comes to absolute ilm ghaib, we're with you. Absolute ilm ghaib is with Allah. Because there are mentions in Quran where even Prophet says, in adri, I don't know. When Prophet says in adri, it does not mean that he does not have knowledge of other things. In adri, for this particular thing. People ask when Qayamat will take place. Rasulullah said, in adri. I don't know if it's qareeb or if it's ba'id. That is the ilm that Allah has with him. But that does not negate that he doesn't have ilm ghaib for other things. So the core Shia beliefs are being undermined by this person, attacking the Shia beliefs. If you openly go ahead and declare yourself to be ghair Shia, we'll say fine. Another person who's, barking and attacking us, fine. But the problem is, labbada Shia orke, calling yourself to be a Shia scholar and then saying these sort of things, is the fitna that we were talking about from within. Even in the time of Rasulullah said, what? I wasn't worried about the mushrikeen and the kuffar of Makkah. What I was more worried about? Munafiqeen within. This is the same thing. We get attacked every single day by the ghair Shia who disagree with us. Fine. Have a debate. You're ghair Shia, you don't believe in it, fine. But to be a Shia, and then to go ahead and create these sort of doubts is where the problem lies. So this is a fitna which is brewing in the UK, and a similar fitna is also brewing in India as well, where there was a speaker that has, alhamdulillah, blessed all of us here in New Jersey as well, and other parts of North America, have given lectures, even from this member, and from Masjid Ali's member, and other places in New Jersey, in Allentown, in New York, and then now have created the similar fitna of undermining the concept of tawassul to A'imma Athar, the concept of ismat and taharat, and all of these things. So we need to be very careful with these fitnas that are being created within. They're more dangerous than those who are openly attacking us. Salawat biji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sorry, the discussion took a different turn tonight, but let me bring you back to our discussion that we were having, which was the Naqsh A'imma dar Ihya Deen, the role of Imams in the revival of Deen. How did the Imams revive the religion? So we mentioned the features of the two makatib, makatib fikr, maktab khilafat, and the maktab imamat. I'll give you, as I said yesterday, one example of how in the time of Rasulullah, he declared who is the one going to explain things after me. And this is a famous story. This is after Fatih Makkah. Rasulullah has returned back to Medina. And now, while in Medina, Rasulullah receives this surah, known as Surah Tawbah or Bara'at. These ayat Bara'at come down to Rasulullah. What does the ayah says? Bara'atun min Allahi wa rasulihi ila alladhina ahadtum min al-mushrikeen. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet are declaring abrogation of peace with the kuffar and the mushrikeen. No more peace with you guys. Absolute abrogation of all the contracts that we had up until this point. And the famous narrations in it, the history behind it, that when these ayat came down, Rasulullah asked Abu Bakr to go ahead and take these ayat to Makkah to go ahead and recite it to the mushrikeen. He took the ayat per the command of Rasulullah, and he started moving in the direction of Makkah. Jibreel came down, said, Rasulullah, either you do it or someone from you should do this. The riwayat, the words of it is, La yuballighu anka illa anta aw rajulun minka. No one except yourself or someone from you should deliver this message. So Rasulullah, for various reasons, couldn't go. And there was a hikmah behind it that he couldn't go. There was a declaration that had to be announced. That who is that rajul minka? That who is that person from you? Rasulullah sends Amirul Mu'mineen, Imamul Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wa salam. Go stop Abu Bakr, take the ayat from him, send him back, and you go ahead and deliver the message. Amir al-Mu'mineen takes the command from Rasulullah, rides as fast as he can to catch up with Abu Bakr, stops him, takes the ayat from him, telling him, Rasulullah has given me this message, here, read it. The message was that hand over the ayat to Ali and you come back. Now the first Khalifa is scared a little bit, saying, has something come down regarding me? Have I done something wrong? He said, no, nothing regarding you. In fact, everything regarding me. अगर कुछ आया तो मेरे बारे में आया, तुम्हारे बारे में कुछ नहीं आया है. Go back, as the Rasulullah is calling you. Amir al-Mu'mineen takes the ayat, he goes to Makkah, stands amongst them, recites the ayat with confidence, with bravery, with valor, and everybody knew the bravery of Amir al-Mu'mineen. There could have been a reaction from the kuffar and the mushrikeen, But of course, after Fatih Makkah, now Muslimin are very strong. But even then, you had to send someone, as the riwayat mentioned. Here Abu Bakr comes back to Rasulullah saying, Rasulullah, did something wrong? Did I do something wrong? Something happened? Rasulullah said, no, nothing of that sort. Only when I sent you, Jibreel came down and he said, either you do it or someone from yourself does it. This tells us one thing, that you are not from me. And this tells us one thing, that Ali is from me. That is the only difference. And that is what the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, that after me, deen should be given by someone who is from me. And that was chosen and that was shown in the events of Mubahala as well. So the riwayat continues. This is not in just our books. Sahih Tirmidhi, Jami Tirmidhi, Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Khasais of Nisa'i. Both of them have narrated this hadith, that Rasulullah said this to Abu Bakr, لا ينبغي لأحد أن يبلغ هذا إلا رجل من أهلي. It is not appropriate for anyone else to go ahead and deliver this message except from person, myself, or someone from my ahl. So we know that Ali is my ahl. And well, people will say, well, how is Ali your ahl? Because he's son-in-law, he's the cousin. Well, from that aspect, Abu Bakr is father-in-law, so he's also ahl. May I remind you of the ayat of Quran in reference to Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam. When he had built the ark and he asked his son to board the ship and don't be with the kuffar and kafirin and deniers, he did not. He said, I will take refuge in the mountain. He said, nothing will save you today. And when he was drowning, Hazrat Nuh pleaded to Allah, Oh Allah, inna wa'dak al-haq. You've made a promise, and this is my son. You know, innahu min, this is my son, wa ibni. Innahu min ahli. He is my ahl. Allah responded in the strongest of the words, Innahu laysa min ahlik. Innahu amalun ghayru salih. He's not your ahl. His amal is ghayr salih. How are you calling him to be your ahl? So here is the biological son of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. No relationship could be bigger and stronger than a father and a son. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers the son of Nuh to be ghayr ahl because his actions were ghayr ahl. His actions were ghayr salih. For that reason, he's not yours. He's not ahl for you. That means he could never be your inheritor. He could never be your heir. And he could not continue your legacy. Salawat bheji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And this is not one incident where Rasulullah called Ali to be minni. There's another incident. In the Battle of Uhud, when the rumor was there that Prophet is killed, Amir al-Mu'mineen was with Rasulullah. He was defending him as the kuffar and mushrikeen were attacking. Amir al-Mu'mineen was warning off all of these enemies to keep them away from Rasulullah, keep him safe and secured. Jibreel was with Rasulullah. Jibreel said to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, inna hadhihi lil muwasat. This is the altruism and the, that Ali's isar that he's presenting at the moment is due to his relationship with you. Because he's got his relationship with you, he's doing this to you, he's protecting you. Rasulullah responded, he said, Qala, innahu minni wa ana minhu. The reason Ali is doing this is because I am from him and he is from me. That is the reason Ali is doing. You know what Jibreel responded at that moment? Jibreel responded at that moment when Rasulullah said, Innahu minni wa ana minhu. Jibreel said, Wa ana minkuma. And I am from both of you. Salawat beji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So this is again, not in our books only, but you'll find the reference to it in Tabari, Al-Kamil ibn Athir, Aghani, Tariq Dimashq, and many other references. That when Rasulullah was being protected by Ali, he said, Innahu minni wa ana minhu. Jibreel says, Wa ana minkuma. And I am from both of you. We've heard the hadith, Husaynun minni wa ana min Husayn. And even Al-Mahdiyu minni. And all of these riwayat are there. But from this aspect, we see how Rasulullah on numerous occasions called Ali to be from himself. But the strong and the cunning enemy is waiting for the demise of Rasulullah to go ahead and attack the religion, because wahi will be discontinued and ghaibi help, madad from the ghaib will also discontinue. Not realizing that what Rasulullah is leaving behind is also a representative that is chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the ayat of Quran, which when Rasulullah was asked to deliver the message, and if you did not deliver, as if you have not conveyed the message at all, Wallahu ya'asimuka minan nas, Allah will protect you from the evil of the enemies. When this ayat came down, and when Ali's wilayat was announced, only then يَئِسَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِن دِينِكُمْ. Today is the al-yawm, today is the day. Kuffar are in despair. Today is the day the kuffar have lost all the hope in their plans. They were waiting for you to die, and once you died, they will go ahead and take over. Because when you leave, your legacy will leave, you don't have any sons, and nothing will remain of you. The moment you announce the wilayat of Ali and announce him to be your successor, the ayat of Quran comes down, Al-yawm ya'is alladhina kafaru. Today is the day. Kuffar are mayus. Why? Because you have announced your legacy. You've announced your inheritor. You've announced your successor in the form of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wa salam. So you'll be surprised as to how Masumeen had to play that role in protecting this deen. I had a few examples for you to get into the role of Masumeen, but inshallah I'll keep that for the days to come, that how they played that vital role in protection of this deen every step of the way. And guess what? Imam of our time is doing that as well. Whenever there's a mistake by a qualified scholar, there's the shafaat and the rightful instructions from Imam Zamana. It's not that Imam is hiding somewhere without any contact. Imam is somewhere where, of course, nobody can go there. Yes, that is what Allah means at the moment. लेकिन उसके साथ साथ ऐसा नहीं है कि इमाम बिल्कुल बेखबर हो. वो आयत आपके सामने पड़ी थी कि अल्लाह जानता है आपके अमाल को, रसूल जानते हैं आपके अमाल को, और मोमिनून से मुराद कौन है? मासूमीन है. क्योंकि हम और आप नहीं जानते एक दूसरे के अमाल को इस तरीके से जैसे मासूमीन को खबर दी जा रही है. तो लिहाजा इमाम का साथ रहता है. वो वाक़या आप लोगों के सामने है, गालिबन शेख मुफीद से एसोसिएटेड है कि एक शख्स आता है, उनसे सवाल करता है कि एक हामिला औरत है और करीबुल मर्ग है और क्या किया जाए, बच्चे को निकाल दिया जाए, फिर उसको जो है वो दफनाया जाए या बच्चे के साथ ही उसको दफना दिया जाए. उन्होंने कहा कि ज़ाहिरन फतवा ये दिया कि ऐसे ही उस औरत को दफना दो, अगर मर गई है, बच्चे को निकालने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. जब वो शख्स ये फतवा लेके चला गया, रास्ते में किसी ने इंटरवीन किया और उसको कहा कि नहीं, शेख ने अपना फतवा तब्दील कर दिया है. वो कह रहे हैं बच्चे को अगर बचा सकते हो तो बचाओ और उसके बाद से औरत को दफना दो. वो गए, उन्होंने बच्चे को बचाया, बच्चा पैदा हो गया और उस औरत को उसकी तदफीन कर दी चूँकि वो गुजर चुकी थी. मुख्तलिफ़ तरीक़े से ये रिवायत मिलती है, ये वाक़या मिलता है कि वो बच्चा ख़ुद जब जवान हो गया तो किसी दिन शेख से मिलने आया, या बाद में उन लोगों ने आके शेख को बताया, शेख मुफीद को, कि बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपने अपना फतवा तब्दील कर दिया, वरना हम 2 जानें ज़ाया कर देते. एक वो माँ तो मरी गई थी, उसके साथ साथ वो बच्चे को भी हम ज़िंदा गूर कर देते, दफन कर देते हैं. तो शुक्रिया बहुत बहुत कि आपने एंड टाइम पे अपना फतवा तब्दील किया और हम उसको तब्दील कर देंगे. शेख ने एकदम से उनको एक तरीके से जैसे शौक़ हुआ, उन्होंने किताबें बंद की, दरवाज़े बंद कर दिए, कोई अब नहीं आ सकता मेरे पास मिलने के लिए, क्योंकि लोगों का तांता बंदा रहता था, सवाल करने वाले आते रहते थे. आज भी आप जाएं क़ौम और नजफ़ जैसे शहरों में तो जो महाराज हमारे हैं उनके घरों पे तांता बंदा रहता, लोग आते रहते हैं, सवालात करते रहते हैं, मिलते रहते हैं. वो उन्होंने अपने दरवाज़े बंद कर दिए, आज के बाद से मैं कोई फतवा नहीं दूंगा. کیونکہ اتنا بڑا بلنڈر میری وجہ سے کسی شخص کی جان چلی جاتی ہے۔ خود بیان کرتے ہیں اپنے احوال میں کہ میں نے خواب میں دیکھا امام زمانہ آتے ہیں اور فرماتے ہیں کہ ہمیں ضرورت ہے کہ تم جیسے لوگ فتوے دیتے رہو، اور جہاں جہاں تمہارے ساتھ کوئی مسئلہ پیش آئے گا اور غلطی کرو گے، ہم آ کے تمہاری مدد کریں گے، ہم آ کے تمہاری کمک کریں گے۔ لیکن یہ نہ کرو کہ دروازے بند کر دو اور لوگوں کی ہدایت سے دور ہو جاؤ۔ نہیں، زمانے غیبت میں تم جیسے لوگوں کی ضرورت ہے، تاکہ دین کی ترویج کی جا سکے، تاکہ راستے کو ایسے پیو کیا جا سکے تاکہ ہمارا جو واپسی ہے وہ آسان اور سہل ہو سکے۔ بہرحال یہ ایک واقعہ تھا، اس طرح کے کئی واقعات ہیں اور کئی اور اماموں کے زمانے کے بھی ہیں کہ کس طریقے سے انہوں نے اس دین کی رکھوالی کی اور ریوائول آف دا دین، نقش ائمہ در احیاء دین، وہ دین جو اپنے آخری سانس لے رہا تھا اس کو دوبارہ زندگی کیسے بخشی ہے۔ انشاءاللہ یہ واقعات آپ کے سامنے آئندہ دنوں میں پیش کریں گے۔ شبیں بڑھتی جا رہی ہیں اور اب وہ ایام آ گئے ہیں کہ جس میں عزادار صرف آتے ہیں اہل بیت کو پرسہ دینے کے لیے۔ وہ دن ہیں کہ جس میں ہم صرف اور صرف اپنے وقت کے امام کو، جناب سیدہ کو، وہ پرسہ دینے آتے ہیں کہ جن کا پرسہ دیتے ہوئے ایک یہ کیفیت طاری ہوتی ہے کہ اس طرح سے بھی لوگوں کو شہید کیا جا سکتا ہے۔ جس شہید کا تذکرہ آج آپ کے سامنے کرنا ہے وہ ان شہداء میں سے ہے کہ جس کے اوپر جہاد واجب نہیں ہے۔ جہاد تو دور کی بات، تلوار کو ہاتھ میں لینا تو دور کی بات، وہ ابھی گھٹنوں بھی نہیں چل سکتا ہے۔ اسی لیے تو امام نے کہا تھا کہ تم جیسوں کو بھی نہر کیا جاتا ہے۔ ہاں، وہ ننھا شہزادہ حضرت علی اصغر، شاید انہی کی وجہ سے امام حسین کو ابا عبداللہ کہتے ہیں، چونکہ علی اصغر کا نام عبداللہ ہے، عبداللہ الرضی، اور امام کو کنیت اپنے چھوٹے بیٹے سے مل رہی ہے ابا عبداللہ کی۔ لیکن آپ دیکھیے کہ امام کی مشکلات اور صعوبتیں کب سے شروع ہو رہی ہیں۔ شب عاشور ہے، امام جائزہ لے رہے ہیں مختلف قیام کا، کبھی اس خیمے میں جاتے ہیں، کبھی اصحاب کے خیموں میں جاتے ہیں، کبھی جوانوں کے خیموں میں جاتے ہیں، کبھی ازواج کے خیموں میں جاتے ہیں، بہن کے خیمے میں جاتے ہیں۔ ایک دفعہ جب امام اپنی زوجہ کے خیمے میں پہنچتے ہیں تو باہر رک کے امام کو رونے کی آواز آئی، گریہ کی آواز آئی۔ امام نے باہر کھڑے ہو کے سنا، رباب کیا کہہ رہی تھیں؟ رباب یہ کہتی ہوئی نظر آ رہی تھیں کہ کل سب شہادتیں قربانیاں دیں گے، میرے پاس تو کوئی قربانی نہیں ہے مولا کے لیے۔ ایک 6 ماہ کا بیٹا ہے جس کے اوپر جہاد واجب نہیں ہے، جو گھٹنوں بھی نہیں چل سکتا، اور ایک 4 سال کی بیٹی ہے جس کے اوپر جہاد واجب نہیں ہے۔ بس امام نے یہ سنا، اپنے آنسوؤں کو پوچھا ہوگا، امام خیمے کے اندر جاتے ہیں اور کہتے ہیں رباب تم اپنے ننھے علی اصغر کی شہادت کو کم مت سمجھنا۔ آپ کو یاد ہے شب عاشور کو جب امام نے چراغ بجھا دیا تھا اور جب دوبارہ چراغ روشن کیا اور تمام شہداء کے نام پڑھے تو قاسم کا نام نہیں تھا اس میں۔ قاسم نے پوچھا کہ کیا مجھے شہادت نصیب ہوگی؟ تو امام نے سوال کیا شہادت تمہارے نزدیک کیسی ہے؟ کہا احلی من العسل۔ امام نے کہا تم تو کیا، تمہارا ننھا بھائی علی اصغر بھی شہید کیا جائے گا۔ بس جلال آیا تھا قاسم کو اس وقت کہ کیا یہ خیمہ گاہ تک پہنچ جائیں گے؟ امام نے کہا نہیں، میں علی اصغر کو لے کے جاؤں گا مقتل میں۔ امام نے رباب سے کہا کہ اپنے بچے کی شہادت کو کم نہ سمجھنا، علی اصغر کا جنگ کرنا، علی اصغر کا جہاد بڑے بڑوں کے جہاد سے بڑھ کر ہوگا، اور جو کوہرام اور جو انقلاب تمہاری بیٹی برپا کرے گی شہر شام میں، اس سے بڑھ کے کوئی اور انقلاب نہیں ہو سکتا کہ تا قیامت اس شہر میں اس جگہ پہ حسین کا نام لینے والے ہوں گے، یزیدیت کو ہمیشہ سے مٹا دے گی تمہاری بیٹی۔ بس یہ واقعہ امام نے بیان کیا، جناب رباب کو ڈھارس ہوئی، سکون ملا، کیونکہ وہ سب چاہتے تھے کہ اپنی قربانیاں پیش کر دیں۔ بس وہ وقت آتا ہے روز عاشور جب امام علیہ الصلاۃ والسلام ایک ایک کر کے ساری شہادتیں قربان کر چکے، ایک ایک شہید جاتا تھا، ہم جو بھی جاتا تھا وہ واپس نہیں آتا تھا۔ جب سارے اصحاب نے نذرانہ عقیدت پیش کیا، نذرانہ شہادت پیش کیا، اب جب اصحاب کے بعد سے بنو ہاشم کی باری آئی، ایک ایک کر کے جوانان بنو ہاشم جاتے رہے اور کوئی واپس پلٹ کے نہیں آتا تھا، بس اب امام تک و تنہا رہ جاتے ہیں۔ ایک دفعہ امام تلوار لے کے وداع کر کے اہل حرم سے امام رخ کرتے ہیں مقتل کا، مقتل میں پہنچتے ہیں، پہنچ کے امام استغاثہ بلند کرتے ہیں، حل من ناصر ینصرنا، کیا کوئی ہے ایسا مددگار جو ہماری مدد کو آئے؟ حل من مغیث یغیثنا، امام نے یہ استغاثہ بلند کرنا تھا کہ کیا دیکھا اس کے 3 اثرات رونما ہوئے۔ پہلا اثر یہ ہوا، جبرائیل نازل ہوئے، کہا حسین تم نے کمک کے لیے بلایا، کہا واپس چلے جاؤ، یہ میرا امتحان ہے۔ دوسرا اثر اس کا یہ ہوا، امام دیکھتے ہیں کہ ایک جوان تلوار ہاتھ میں لے کے خیمے سے باہر نکلنا چاہتا ہے اور ایک بی بی بڑی مشکل سے اس کو روک رہی ہے۔ یہ امام سجاد تھے، امام حسین آتے ہیں، کہا بیٹا سجاد کیا ارادہ ہے؟ کہا بابا آپ نے استغاثہ بلند کیا، میں کیسے نہ جواب دوں، لبیک کہوں؟ امام نے کہا اے بیٹا یہ مرحلہ آسان ہے، تمہیں جس مرحلے سے گزرنا ہے وہ زیادہ کٹھن ہوگا، تم یہیں پہ رہو۔ بس امام نے آثار سارے کے سارے اسرار و رموز امامت منتقل کیے۔ اس کا تیسرا اثر بھی سنتے جائیے۔ تیسرا اثر کیا ہوا؟ ایک دفعہ خیمے سے کوہرام کی وبا ہوا، آوازیں بلند ہوئیں، ایک دفعہ گریہ و زاری ہوئی، امام فوراً اس خیمے پہ پہنچے۔ یہ وہ خیمہ تھا جہاں گہوارہ علی اصغر رکھا ہوا تھا۔ امام نے آ کے دریافت کیا، اے زینب کیسا کوہرام ہے؟ ابھی حسین زندہ ہے؟ کہا اے حسین، آپ نے کہا حل من ناصر ینصرنا، علی اصغر نے اپنے آپ کو گہوارے سے گرا دیا۔ اجرکم اللہ، خدا کسی غم میں نہ رلائے سوائے غم آل محمد کے۔ امام سمجھ گئے کہ ننھا شہزادہ بھی لبیک کہہ رہا ہے، باپ کے استغاثے کے اوپر شہادت کا جذبہ اس 6 ماہے کے اندر بھی ہے۔ امام نے ننھے علی اصغر کو ہاتھوں پہ بلند کیا، امام نے علی اصغر کو ہاتھ میں لے کے لے جانا چاہا۔ ایک دفعہ ننھی سکینہ نے حسرت بھری آنکھوں سے دیکھا کہ شاید بابا لے جا رہے ہیں پانی پلانے کے لیے، کیونکہ رباب سے یہی کہا، ماں کو یہی دلاسا دیا، اے رباب لاؤ علی اصغر کو دے دو، کیا آپ اس کو مقتل میں لے کے جائیں گے؟ کہا نہیں، میں پانی طلب کروں گا۔ اجرکم اللہ، امام نے علی اصغر کو پانی کے لیے طلب کیا، لے کے آتے ہیں مقتل میں، پہنچتے ہیں، لائنوں سے محو گفتگو، کہا تم مجھ سے جنگ کرنے آئے ہو، میرے خون کے پیاسے ہو، ارے اس ننھے بچے نے تم پہ کیا ظلم کیا ہے؟ 3 دن سے بھوکا اور پیاسا ہے، ماں کا دودھ بھی خشک ہو گیا۔ میں اپنی بہنوں سے کہوں گا، ماں سے کہوں گا، جب وہ فرش عزا پہ آتی ہیں ننھے بچوں کو ساتھ لاتی ہیں تو بچوں کے لیے پانی اور دودھ رکھتی ہیں کہ اگر بچہ کسی وقت بھی گریہ کرے تو اس کو پانی دے دیا جائے، ارے دودھ دے دیا جائے۔ لیکن یہ مائیں کیا کریں؟ 3 دن سے کربلا میں ایک قطرہ بوند پانی نہیں ہے۔ اجرکم اللہ، امام بے بس ہو کے لاتے ہیں علی اصغر کو، معجزے سے پانی لا سکتے ہیں مگر وہ منظور نہیں ہے۔ لے کے آئے علی اصغر کو، کہا اس کا کیا قصور ہے؟ کیا ایک پانی اس کو پلایا جا سکتا ہے؟ اگر تم سمجھتے ہو حسین اپنے لیے پانی مانگ رہا ہے تو میں بچے کو زمین پہ لٹاتا ہوں۔ بس امام نے ننھے سے علی اصغر کو زمین پہ لٹایا، امام نے امامت کے انداز میں اپنے فرزند سے گفتگو کی، بیٹا تم بھی اتمام حجت کر دو۔ بس ننھے سے علی اصغر نے اپنی خشک زبان اپنے ہونٹوں پہ پھیری، زبان کا پھیرنا تھا کہ دشمنوں کی صفوں میں کھلبلی مچ گئی، ارے ہر کوئی اپنے منہ چھپا رہا تھا، منہ موڑ کے آنسو پوچھ رہے تھے وہاں بھی گریا شروع ہوا. عمر سعد کہتا ہے, کیا کہتا ہے؟ کہتا ہے اقطع کلام الحسین. اقطع کلام الحسین, امام حسین کے کلام کو منقطع کر دو. ایک دفعہ سے شعبہ تیر نکالا, مائناز تیر باز ہے لیکن ہاتھ میں لچک ہے, ہاتھ میں لچک آتی ہے, تیر چوک جاتا ہے. ایک دوبارہ بولا پسر سعد نے کہ تمہارے اندازے کو کیا ہوا؟ دوبارہ تیر کھینچا مگر تیر پھر نشانے پہ نہ لگا. کہا تمہیں کیا ہوا ہے آج کہ تمہارا تیر نشانے پہ نہیں لگتا؟ کہا میں جیسے ہی تیر کھینچتا ہوں دور ایک بی بی نظر آتی ہے جو خیمے سے دیکھ رہی ہے, شاید یہ اسی کا بچہ ہے. ارے میرا تیر چوک جاتا ہے. اجرکم اللہ. بس وہ آخری تیر ایسا نشانے پہ لگا, علی اصغر کے حلقوم میں پیوست ہوا, خون کا فوارہ بلند ہوا. حسین نے ننھے سے علی اصغر کی لاش کو ہاتھوں میں اٹھایا, چاہتے تھے کہ خون کو آسمان کی طرف پھینک دیں. آواز آئی کہ اگر ایک قطرہ بھی آسمان پہ پہنچا کبھی بارش نہ ہوگی, چاہا زمین پہ ڈال دیں. کہ اگر زمین پہ ایک خون کا قطرہ گرا تو کوئی غلہ نہ اگے گا. حسین نے اپنی محاسن کو رنگین کیا, ننھے علی اصغر کو لے کے چلے ہیں. آپ اور ہم یہ عمل انجام دیتے ہیں. امام کی تأسی میں 7 مرتبہ آگے پیچھے ہوتے ہیں. شاید امام تردد کی عالم میں تھے کہ بچے کو لے کے گیا تھا, ماں کو دلاسا دیا تھا کہ پانی پلانے لے جا رہا ہوں, واپس لاشا لاؤں گا تو ماں پہ کیا گزرے گی. بس امام نے ایک روایت کے مطابق ایک قبر کھودی اور اس میں علی اصغر کو دفن کر دیا. اور دوسری روایت کہتی ہے کہ امام آئے, آ کے آواز دی, اے رباب لے جاؤ اپنے بچے کو. ننھی سکینہ جیسے ہی یہ سنا بھاگی بھاگی آئی, آ کے فوراً کہا بابا علی اصغر زیادہ عزیز تھا, اس کو پانی پلا لائے. ارے سکینہ پیاسی ہے اب تک. امام نے ابا کا دامن الٹا, علی اصغر کا بدن خون میں ملوث دیکھا. الا لعنت اللہ علی القوم الظالمین وسیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون. ماتم حسین. یا حسین.